Namaskar. Welcome to the fourth episode in our series on India Rising. India's youth growing up in India is one sixth of humanity, a generation that will probably see world at its highest level of population. What are their hopes, aspirations, the future that they see for themselves with their boundless energy, enthusiasm, and initiative? They define our hopes for a better world. Today, we welcome our special guests, Dr. Nivedita Haran, retired IS officer joining us from New Delhi, and Dr. Narayanan Komerath, a retired professor of aerospace engineering from the United States of America. Currently, he's speaking from Kerala at the southern tip of India, and I am Anjalee of Bharat TV from Phoenix, Arizona. So, I'm going to start with my first question to Narayananji. Narayananji, would you like to take a crack at introducing this broad topic?
So, namaste. Let me think through a quick presentation as soon as the slides start.
Sure. I think we'll just have this presentation. There you go. Yeah.
India's rising population has an average age in the late 20s. The education level is rising fast, and that is the point to note here. Let's look at a few phases of this population. You might agree or disagree with them, but they're not passive. They're very passionate about their own future, of course. Life is very hard, but they manage to keep smiling. And whatever they do, they bring color and spirit and tradition to everything. They deliver life-saving excellence and dedication in the toughest conditions. And they don't allow anything to dampen their spirits as they celebrate their independence. This is again, the education level is increasing. We no longer have the number who don't have any education or only primary level education is fast decreasing. The rest are better educated. Thank you.
Well, thanks, Narayananji. I must say, beautiful slides, and they speak a lot. They say a picture is 1,000 words. So we all talk of the demographic dividend, but what exactly does that mean? And I'm going to ask this question to Nivedita.
Thanks, Anjali. Namaskar to everyone. Technically, demographic dividend refers to the population profile of the country. It implies that between 65 to 75% of the population, as much as 3/4 of the population of that country or that place, is below 30 to 35 years of age. India is since the last 5 years or so and is expected to continue in this phase for the next 25 to 30 years. So it implies that as India's population will be predominantly young, the government needs to invest more on education, on generating skills. The state and non-state actors need to focus on job creation, on infrastructure, housing, health, sports, and other recreational activities. In short, the government policies should take into account this factor at every level and undergo a sea change. On the positive side, the country's productivity will be at its peak in the manufacturing, in the services sector. The population will be largely tech savvy and innovative, hopefully. There'll be big risk takers and big consumers. Just imagine, for over 30 years, India will be home to one of the largest group of young persons, most of whom will be literate, aware, and tech savvy. I find it mind-boggling to even think about it. Imagine the heights of development and prosperity we can achieve if only we manage the situation well. So we must manage it well, as failure is not an option. If we fail in ensuring education for this young population, fail to provide them with skill as a source for gainful employment, homes for them and their families to live in, transport, communication, civic services, etc., we will be looking at a dark future. A future with high rate of criminality, drug abuse, and growing socioeconomic inequities.
Very, very wisely put, Nivedita. So let me ask you this: that what role do you think the other actors can play? Like I'm talking about the academics, the corporate sector, the youth activists, and also I'm thinking about the school and college students.
Yes, Anjali, that's very important. And I'm sure and I think most of our youngsters these days are thinking on this area, on these subjects. The slides that Professor Narayanan presented gave us the rosy side of it, the good side of it, that we have the youth, very active, very forward looking, upwardly mobile. But statistics can often do that. They show us the good side and the bad side sometimes. But we need to talk about the problems too, because we need to circumvent them together. Even though enrollment in our schools, for instance, has been rising, the dropout rate is very high, especially in certain states in North India. Children of migrant labor often fall through the crack. They don't go to school. I have seen it in Kerala. Narayananji is sitting in Kerala. Just go across and ask one of the migrant workers, does your child go to school? We found, on a rough estimate, we did a short survey in and around Ernakulam city. We found in just 3 wards, 85 kids who are in the age group of 10 to 15 or 16 years, and they have never been to school, and they are all children of migrant workers. Then the quality of our school education. That is also very important. Independent studies have shown that there is much that we can do to improve it. There is also an urgent need to include as part of education basic ethics, sensitivity, empathy, and patriotism. Patriotism should not be a bad word. We need to have that. Being polite to others, being kind and sensitive to all living beings, being considerate and helpful towards the needy, being honest and truthful. These are basic moral principles in life. Every child should be taught at home, in school, and in college. Similarly, every person should grow up with a strong civic sense, protect public property, be law abiding, and love our country. Only then will our country have a healthy set of youth. It is a duty of our teachers to set good examples. Our political leaders should display the above qualities and become role models. And our school and college students need to inculcate these qualities and be as good, nay, even better than the youth in other countries.
Very true, Nivedita. And when we talk about the growing population, what comes to my mind at the same time is the population is aging and retiring in the West and Japan and China. But these are this was just my thought. Narayanji, I would like you to jump in. What do you have to say?
So let me point to a contrast. When we were growing up, my generation, and we are getting old, we were looking out at the world to set us examples of what is a modern society, how should development go, etc., etc. Rich Indian parents sent their children to get foreign degrees. Others, like me, focused on getting good grades and to get into higher education as our one and only chance. Okay, and the stress was very high. It is still extremely high. That's one unfortunate aspect of Indian education. In my time, if you got 60%, you were considered to have got a first class. Today, people get 99% and don't get admission to some institutions. And so imagine the stress that this causes. Anyway, but many of my generation had to just emigrate to very tough conditions. I don't include myself in that. And work in alien societies. I do include myself in that. But today, the top students in India's best institutions of higher education are racing into startup companies. They're seeking venture capital and striking out on their own in business. It's sort of a Wild West time in the United States history in India, but in a much, much better way. The government is actually helping this. I think the government helped the American settlers move to the West as well, but this is not about hurting anybody or anything. It's a very, very positive thing. This brings a different sort of risk, mind you, from what we faced when we were going to strange foreign lands, but which had their own support systems. But being in their own land and society, I think it's a great thing. It perhaps brings some cushion and support, but also a lot of challenges and competition. So, yeah, I want to hear others' perspective on this. This is a very interesting phenomenon in our country, in India.
Absolutely, Narayananji. So I have this question. Does a country that enjoys demographic dividend, that you mentioned, so does it have advantages, especially in the socio-economic sectors? Now, with reference to the environment and climate change, what do you have to say?
Yes, Anjali. They do. Definitely they do. There is a strong correlation between a country's economic development and its demographic profile. And this is evident from examples of many countries. And this is especially true now in the digital age. My 18-year-old nephew, for instance, is much more agile and digitally adept than I am. He can get so much more done and much faster. But even though there is a surfeit of information all around, it is not necessary that his knowledge level is higher than most others or mine. A country needs to have an ideal synergy of the knowledge and experience of the not so young, like us, and the technical expertise of the youth. That is how a country will prosper and grow. I think that would be wonderful. I have a lot of faith in the country's youth, and I have a really poignant illustration. When I moved to this place from Kerala, which is in the Delhi NCR, and I saw these migrant children not going to school, and I asked the people living around me, and most of them were in the same age group as mine or even higher, that let's start something. Let's put these kids in a Brit school, and then let's put them in a regular school after some months. And you won't believe it. Not only did they not show any interest, but they actually laughed at me. They made fun of me. They said, "Come on, you're trying to change the world? That's how UP is. That's how Delhi is. You can't do anything." But you know what? The people who came forward were the young techies who are living around me. There are quite a few of them because there are a lot of IT companies where I live. And these guys came forward and said, men and women, girls and boys, and they said, "Madam, we want to give back something to society." And I was really overwhelmed. So this is the generation we are talking about. And, I want to finally say that this kind of thought and this kind of statement often made that hamare zamane mein sab acha hua karta tha. I don't think that is the case. You have very positive, very good, very dedicated and patriotic youngsters in our country. We need to bring them out and we need to give them a chance to perform.
So let me just add one thing to that. I very recently moved from what is considered one of the top communities in the United States. I was not one of the richest people there by any stretch of the imagination, but the top schools and top everything there, to Kerala. And I'm having a very challenging time, exciting time learning, because everything works on the mobile phone here. There's so many things every day and the way they use it, I'm still tied to a laptop computer, but it's amazing the amount of change that has come about in India. And I'm really learning very fast. And of course, these young people are my IT gurus, including my grand nephew, who is not allowed to touch a cell phone by his mother. And so he came and sat near me and said, "Can I please borrow your phone?" And in 5 minutes, he had taught me a lot of things that I had no idea about. Obviously, in school, you did get some training, but they're now naturally they've They're born into a society which has these things, so they feel like it's always been there. It's going to be amazing to watch what the country will become as these people, define their own generation. Thank you.
So, can you tell me one more thing, Narayananji, that the demographic dividend, yes, of course, it has so many, many benefits, hard to count, but can it also turn out to be a liability?
So you want me to talk about the bad news? Yes, urban overcrowding is a harsh reality. There is no denying it. It's very, very difficult. But you see, in rural agricultural society, each mouth usually comes with two strong hands, and so more people was always an asset. Except when the food was just short all around or whatever. Child mortality used to be very high, so parents wanted kids so that at least some would survive to help them in old age. But education and social security nets of different sorts should remove some of this fear. And so I believe the population will come down. That will turn out to be a liability in a few decades because India will be an aging country at that point. But hopefully the resources should have been built up by then and better planning done and all these kind of things. Again, business families work differently from those who depend on salaried jobs. So this may be a huge societal transformation perhaps going back to the way things were in ancient times, and according to the rosy pictures pointed about that. But I wonder how today's startup culture will morph into perhaps a culture of business families that have their own support systems, that don't look to the government for everything, or nor to a steady job, so to speak. These people are used to switching jobs, taking on new projects, entrepreneurship with all its challenges and opportunities and excitement.
Well, a very important thing that you talked about business families. Are there examples of other countries who enjoyed this phase? And do you have any idea as to how they handled it? Are there any lessons that we can learn from such countries?
I'm not sure there are examples that I haven't thought of examples of this business family type of society, but we can certainly look at how some societies have improved drastically. The war-torn economies of South Korea and Japan, who incidentally have cultures that are in many ways very, very similar to the better aspects of Indian culture, I should say. They provide many examples of how society developed support mechanisms in extremely difficult times, as well as competitive pressures. I must say that South Korea, I saw a little bit of that. Their youth are highly stressed by modern competitive technological environment. Again, the pressure to get very good grades and all these kind of things. So that's what I see here.
I see. I think Nivedita is having some issues here. My next question was actually for her. Okay, looks like she lost connectivity. But let me ask you this, Narayananji. India is projected to become the most populous country by 2023. So, what do you see as its pluses and minuses?
Well, urban overcrowding must be reduced. I dread having to get out and drive on Indian roads. I don't have a driver's license that is valid right now, so I am saved that issue. But soon I hope to get that license once I master the digital process for getting that. So the way to reduce urban crowding, in my opinion, is by improving life in the villages and opportunities in the villages. And as you know, that happened somewhat unintentionally because of the COVID-19 epidemic or pandemic. The cities emptied out and people actually had to set up businesses in villages. That was not so bad. And I think that has, that part was not so bad. So, but this imperative is also an opportunity. So it can bring dynamic progress all over India, much more mobility across the nation, much more mobility in jobs, in career choices, in all these kind of things. And it can erase these linguistic barriers, which have been both, of course, a unique aspect, but a great challenge in many respects, while discovering our common heritage and our traditions. So instead of having to impose an external language like English, in which I am constrained to have to speak, I think Indians are developing their own unique way of dealing with these linguistic barriers, and that will actually. The good thing is that they are doing it in the context of Indian heritage and traditions.
That is really very, very promising to know, Narayananji. Also, we know that India is going to be probably a country with the largest, youngest population, right? So, and of course, a lot of diversity. This is like one country where you find so much of diversity, which is hard to find in any other part of the world. So, what do you have to say? How do you think this is going to play out in the future when it comes to job creations and the startups? And we are also talking about language barriers. So, how do you think how this is all going to play out in the future?
I'll again make the optimistic projections on what can be done, at least as my imagination, when people put their minds to work on this. So we saw some of these in Kerala, for example. See, I was kind of stunned when I went to the United States and saw that in engineering schools, there were hardly 10% who were women. Okay? And they said, career counselors in high school tell women students that engineering is not for you. That's such a geek, very bad work environment, etc., etc. And I know that is a fact. I said, look, this is stunning, because in my classes, that is true. There were only 2 women students in the IIT Madras batch out of 200, or the batch of 200. And they were at the top of the class, have gone places, of course. But when my younger sister went to school in Kerala, 60% of the class were women. So that was the reality, even in back in the 1970s, mind you. And I said, "This is what's the problem in America?" So many of these things India has been leading. Okay? Now it's unfortunate if people then go and get examples from other countries where they just haven't figured out how to do things right. So we already saw that these things could be done. Okay, so let me continue after Nivedita has a say about things.
I'm sorry about that. Yeah, I don't know what happened.
That's absolutely fine, Nivedita. So we are going to come back to that question where we were talking about. In fact, I asked Narayananji to provide examples of some other country who enjoyed this phase of life, where there were business and some background.
There's a lot of disturbance.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's better now. Okay, so we were talking about this phase, and we were just wondering if, in fact, I was wondering if there were other countries who went through the same phase, where you had families working together as their businesses. So Narayananji mentioned that in war-torn economies, let's say South Korea, Japan, they provide many examples of such. He didn't particularly have an example, but I was wondering that what are your thoughts on this?
Yes, Anjali. First, my apologies, but I'm back. Unfortunately, such studies in recent times are very few and far between. And this is an area where our researchers and academics should be working on, our social scientists and others, and economists. But I know of some researchers in some of the centers of higher learning where I'm connected. They are discussing this subject. They are writing papers on it, especially from the growth and economic perspectives. However, there is also need to look at it from the social perspective. What kind of support system will small nuclear families need, for instance? How about the homes for senior citizens? Because the families will The elderly will probably be left alone as the children, the younger generation goes out. Uh, will the profile of core infrastructure change? What we call the core infrastructure. Something different will come in perhaps in the digital age. Who will drive the stock market? The below 30s or the above 60s? These are some areas that need deep research. And one thing that comes to my mind is with the over dependence on digital technology, we should not create social inequity amongst people who have access to it and people who don't. Anjali.
Very true. So, what can the common person do to get the maximum benefit out of it? Hope you are able to hear me because I'm still hearing some disturbance. I would like to repeat the question. I'm just wondering that what can the common person do to get maximum benefit out of this kind of opportunity for business families and supporting the elderly, aged population. If it is going to be people in their 30s or above their 60s who would be ruling the stock market. So, what are your views on this?
Yeah, it is. First, it is very important to keep abreast of the latest developments in all sectors, especially in the digital sector. Education should not be limited to simple classroom education. Learning from field experience, learning to innovate, learning to empathize with the people, these are equally important, what we call the experiential knowledge. Also, the importance of protecting the environment, the flora, the fauna, our natural assets, such as forests, water bodies, lakes, ponds, wetlands, coastal areas. These are going to be crucial for the present and future generations. As part of a court committee, I remember working in one of the lakes in Srinagar. And I found that the youngsters actually came forward saying that we know that this is for our future and therefore we want to contribute. So I think the youngsters have the desire, but what they need is good role models like Professor Narayanan and some others, and they need the push and the fora where they can use their expertise to give back something to the country.
Yeah, and in fact, there was this youth leader, Junaid Saab, who was supposed to. Unfortunately, he's not well. I received a message that he's not doing well at all. So we missed him this time, but I'm sure we can get him next time. And when I spoke to him, a few weeks back, he had a lot of ideas. And he, in fact, had a kind of a roadmap for youth. So maybe next time we can present that. But this ties up with whatever you're saying, Nivedita. That what is it that the youth what lies ahead of them. So I'm going to come back to Narayananji. We were discussing this question that India is projected to become the most populous country by 2023. And we were talking about some of the pluses, some of the minuses. We just want to talk about that. So, Narayananji, what do you want to?
So, a few more mention something from where at least we could see the trends back in the 1970s, 50 years ago. Now, if you look at the workplaces of India, they are, I believe, very well integrated. The proportion of men and women in most jobs is about 50-50 as far as I can tell. And many things that I watched these transitions over the decades, many things that we said, oh, this will never change, it's so horrible, have just miraculously changed. One is pollution, just the smoke on the streets. It used to be terrible. And then it just disappeared. They changed it. Smoking in public places, that was the most astonishing thing to me. India banned smoking in public places, and we don't even remember an age where you got a headache if you got on a bus. You got a headache if you went into a movie theater. It's gone. It can be done. So today, if you drive on the roads in Kerala, at least, and if you're not the driver, and your eyes are not tightly closed, you say, "Oh my goodness, how can this mess ever be resolved?" Imagine that this generation with startup companies comes up with self-driving vehicles at all levels. People will laugh, and I've seen some discussions on this on the internet, and they said, "Oh my goodness, self-driving cars will simply pull to the side and stop and give up on Indian roads because you have to monitor not four cars as you might have to monitor on a Western highway, but you have to monitor 100 things moving at different speeds and in totally random directions." Maybe that's not so. Maybe if all of those things had self-driving software or whatever, and control systems and computing power, they would behave in a much better way, and they might actually form a circle around the people who are not behaving and make sure they can't get out of there. So there might be really unique solutions coming up that you cannot sit there and see, oh, what's being done in Germany or United States or whatever. There are many things that are going to be very unique Indian solutions. And I'm saying that today the power is there to do these things. The diversity, as you mentioned, the linguistic barriers, there are really unique things coming out where I've seen some demonstrations of this, where you walk around on a street with a mobile phone, of course, and it can read the signs in a place where you're otherwise illiterate and translate to whatever language you want. So this is done for all Indian languages, so people can actually move around quite well, instead of having to making everybody learn all languages, which is not going to happen. And then the commonalities come about. So I think there are going to be really unique solutions. My imagination is simply not up to seeing what all things can happen. I can imagine that time might soon come where the road noise is down to a minimum, because they're all going to be electric motors running or something, and they'll be silent. That pollution is really down because you're burning hydrogen, if you're burning anything. And what happens when the streets are really clean, the air is quite fresh. My ideal, as I've tried mentioning to some people, is I said, look, it's not an ideal situation where everybody has to wear boots to walk around on the streets. Okay, my ideal, there's no reason why Indian streets cannot be like Disney World or somewhere, because the weather is so good, you don't need to wear shoes. So I said barefoot sidewalks is probably the ideal, and we will get there, I'm pretty sure, because we had them in old days inside in places which were kept clean. There's no reason why that cannot be. So many things are going to be really unique Indian solutions, and so I'll just leave it there and say I can't imagine what they're going to do.
It's very encouraging to hear all this, because usually when we read about news items about India in Western media, we read about this heaps of garbage and this and that, and now we are talking about electric vehicles, which is just at par with any other advanced nation. It's really great to know. Nivedita, I would like to know some of your thoughts or your comments on this topic.
Yeah. Yes, Anjali. Listening to Professor Narayanan, I was thinking, in contrast of another event that happened fairly recently, where a part of the expressway has been so developed and so constructed that even a jet plane could land on it, an Air Force plane could land on it. So you see, and that's needed sometimes for evacuation during disasters, etc. And some countries have it, and India now has it. So a part of the expressway that goes to Agra from where I live, from Delhi, in eastern UP, near Varanasi, there are spots where the road is so well constructed that even airplanes can land on it. Getting there. But you have to understand that we are a democracy. And in a democracy, things take longer. And as you rightly said, we will not only be the largest, most populous country in a few years, but we will also be the youngest population.
Very true. As I mentioned earlier, that
Yes,
while we are talking about while we are talking about us being the youngest population, at the same time, population is aging and retiring in the West, Japan, China. So yes, there is a lot of promise for India, and I'm sure a lot of Western countries are looking to invest in India for the same reason, because they see future of for technology, digital India ahead of us. So Narayananji, talking of digital India, where do you think our youth?
And the Japanese.
Yes, please go ahead, Nivedita. Were you having any
Sorry.
problem hearing me?
Yeah, your voice is coming in, with a lag.
Oh, okay. Is it better now? Hello?
Yeah, it's better now.
Okay.
I don't know about Narayan.
I can hear you.
Okay. So my question was on digital India. So do you think, I'm since you're from IIT and you've been a professor, do you see that our future, our generation, the young population that we have, they have some dreams about taking the digital India to another level, to the next level? And if yes, where do you think we are heading
I
to?
all I can say about that is that yes, they are most certainly dreaming up things, and no, I can't imagine where they're going, because I'm certainly not smart enough to see all the things that they are going to see. And this is what happens when you have large numbers of people and diverse people given the opportunity to use their brains and work with others. It's fantastic what I'm seeing. I just on the context of that, I recently, in the process of setting up my new abode, I looked for a fan to spread the air from the air conditioning which I need around the house. And I looked on internet, of course. Bought it from Amazon.com, and I looked around for something that had remote control. The best deal there, and it was not cheap, was a company. I won't say its name because I won't advertise it, but I think people will find it easy enough. And it had a name that, if it sounded like anything, it sounded like a mad Israeli scientist. I said, "Oh, okay, whatever import." But it seemed like the really best thing. It had fantastic reviews and the best features and all that. So I got it. And it came, and I opened it, and it said, "This is an IIT Bombay startup company." Okay.
There you go. There you go. Absolutely.
Absolutely the best fan I have seen. Very silent, and the remote control, everything works. Just and I had to remark that it was challenging to set it up. Because in the US, they might have said any 8-year-old with a PhD in engineering can do this. It was a bit challenging. And then I said, look, to these people, it's like, you don't know this, you must be really stupid. So it worked. It was quite easy to set up, actually, once you realize the way they were thinking. This is an example. So I'm really beginning to see some of the things that are coming out, and this was just the best product on the market.
In fact, I also would like to add a comment. My sister-in-law just came back from India after visiting India, after a long gap, and she mentioned that she was quite surprised to see that all the small vendors they use
Oh,
the
yeah.
digital technology, whether it's fruit sellers, vegetable sellers, and I had never imagined that 20 years back. I never thought that this day will come.
Every delivery comes with OTP, so you have to rush out with your phone in hand. And some are OTP, some just take a photograph of your phone. It's just amazing.
Absolutely. So Nivedita is kind of in and out, I think, because of some technical issues. But definitely, Narayananji, it's this is such a vast topic, and there is so much to talk about, so much that just by observing the environment around us. I mean, in fact, I mean you, because you're currently posited in India. What changes do you see, now that you have started living in India after having lived in the United States for such a long time? What changes do you see, and how do you think that, this is going to be a very promising future for the young generation?
So, I it's changed in some ways, and of course the traditional challenges remain, so they can't be ignored. So, innovative solutions are coming out for some things, but as we say, for every 2 steps forward, we'll take 1 step back for various reasons. Okay, there are conflicts, there are different opinions, and what people want to do conflicts with what some other people want to do. So there are all kinds of issues. But I think I'm just going through that experience. It's too early to say everything. One thing let me mention about the technology. The revolution has come in digital technology. And most of these startup companies are whatever, cell phone, software, etc., that's been the leadership, or very small devices. The big problem has been that what is real to me? Machinery that is not software. Fabrication, these manufacturing of things that are not cell phones or electronic devices. It has been extremely difficult to get this going in India, partly because the infrastructure is not there. You can't go find a supplier for something easily, as you could in the West or in China or somewhere. So you could not match prices of things coming in from abroad. So this has to change. It is changing in the following manner. I think there is manufacturing infrastructure being set up in association with imported production lines, like automobiles, things like that. I remember, commenting to people who were building fighter planes that when they tried to build composite panels, maybe they should ignore the aerospace engineers and go bring in their automobile manufacturing people, because those people really knew how to make very high quality things. So I think this kind of cross-fertilization between industries is going to happen. And that is how the manufacturing is going to rise really in India and lead to innovation in the so-called bigger engineering, where I would say today Germany and United States might be leading, or Japan as technology and everything. So this is an area where India is really behind in a lot of respects, but I think I can see how this is changing. That was why that fan was such a pleasant surprise.
Yeah,
Interesting,
very interesting story.
The names I knew in India from 50 years ago. Oh, fan, you buy XYZ. Those are made in China. So I was rather depressed about it until I opened this package. So this is what I see happening.
Right, and we have Nivedita back with us. So, Nivedita, you heard a part of our conversation. I would like to talk to you about some policies. So, what kind of policies do you think, or would you expect from the government that will be youth friendly? Because we are talking about some of these things where the infrastructure is not available at the moment. So, are you aware of any policies which are youth friendly?
Yes, I can. I'll start with an example, Anjali. I was at a meeting of the ILO, which was on migrant labor, international migrants and internal migrants. And very interestingly, there was a representative from the Japanese embassy in India, and they have a project whereby they want India to train more than 10,000 health workers in nursing, in senior citizens care, etc. Because then they want to set up homes in India where they want to keep their senior persons. You see, because they say in Japan it's so expensive and it's so difficult to find the infrastructure for running such centers that they would rather do it in another country where you can easily get health workers, trained health workers. So you see, this kind of thing government is encouraging to provide employment to our youth. We know that some of the best nurses and healthcare workers come from India, in fact from Kerala. We know that our youngsters are very digitally savvy. So the government is, I'm aware, encouraging training, pre-departure training to other countries, even within the country, allowing youngsters not only to get uh, be trained in some kind of vocation, but also upskill themselves. Because not a person who's an unskilled labor working in faraway Kerala should not be limited to that. He should get an opportunity to upskill himself to become a mason or a carpenter, so that he can come back to his land and he can work there or work somewhere else and make a better earning, better living. So these kind of policies are coming up, Anjali, I'm aware of.
So, in the past couple of years, due to COVID, and of course, we have been reading about some communal inharmony, communal tension which have occurred in India. Have they caused setback? I mean, I'm sure they have, but what has the government done about it? Because you're talking of immigrant workers, you remember a lot of immigrant workers, they went back, they had to leave their jobs. COVID had a very heavy impact. I mean, it took a toll on their jobs. So right now, how does it look like? I mean, are the workers coming back? Has the government put any policies in place so that these kind of things are taken care of in the future?
Do you want me to go, Anjali?
Yes, whosoever.
Yeah. Maybe I'll start off. Yeah, it is. There are a lot of policies where the government is trying to, as I mentioned earlier, provide better training, vocational training to our youngsters, because that is something that we are really lacking in. I was in Australia recently, and I found that the kind of fascination that Indians have in getting a graduation degree is not there. Even from school, from class 8 and 9, from high school, the children are taught some kind of hand craft or a vocation which they enjoy and which they are good at. We should
And
do that.
can lead to money now. That's the big difference. That can lead to a really, really lucrative, satisfying career where they can practice in their own environment. That is the huge change that is coming.
I think that's the cue. And I think the new education policy, Anjali, for that matter, talks a lot about it. But I hope more is done. And frankly, I think the government alone cannot do everything. I think the private sector has to come in. The non-state sectors, the corporates, the institutions, they all have to chip in.
Actually, you're very true, because I remember when we were in India back home at that time, everybody used to say that going to college was taken as a default. We had to, once you pass your 12th standard, you have to go to college. There was no ifs and buts about it. But I remember one of my friends, he used to say that I don't understand why I need to go to college, because this is just like increasing three more years in me being unemployed. I don't know what am I going to get out of those 3 years. So unless and until it is a vocational course, a vocational degree where you can actually make yourself employable, the rest of it are just simply academic. I think I'll call it academic certificates. I'm not sure where they really, where all of them really lead to, because
you couldn't get married without it.
Yes, that's right. It's a marriage. It's a marriage qualification.
You don't have a government job, you don't have a degree from whatever institution. These were the kinds of, no doubt, a good reason. But anyway, yeah.
But it's changing. It's changing.
Yes, it's changing.
Yeah,
Right.
thankfully. I think the youngsters are not so enamored by college education anymore.
Yeah.
Yes,
So-
and I'm
But
glad.
On the topic of government, let me say this. It may not be directly. It is directly relevant to the changes brought by India's youth. So, as you know, I told you I've recently relocated to India, and the last part of the relocation is getting all my worldly possessions, or most of my worldly possessions, transported by shipping container. Okay. And this was an interesting time to do that. I won't go through all of the horrors that have been going on with supply chain disruptions, container ships stuck in the Suez Canal, war in Ukraine, this and that, and 700 ships stuck off Shanghai. Anyway, the last part was when it actually got to India. And I had no lack of horror stories conveyed to me about what to expect and all this. And I must say that I have been crossing international borders since I was 0.25 years old. Okay. So I have my own views on how customs treats people and all those kind of things. But in recent times, it has been, airlines, it has been very, very smooth. You just walk through and fine. But this was different. So I went there, of course, very well prepared. And what I found was absolutely amazing. Okay, so they said, "Oh, come at 9:30," and we try to get everything done by 1 o'clock. And the process is that 3 customs officers will come by independently. And of course, there were the suggestions that if you, do you want whatever? I said, look, they can take as long as they want and examine whatever they want. I'm not really short of time because I'm retired. But that was not the process. The process was there was this young lady sitting there who got up and started looking, and everything was open. They asked tons of questions, found out everything about it, wrote down a lot of things. No nonsense. And then she didn't, talk to me about. And she said, "Oh, there are a lot of people coming back, and it's getting crowded around here. We don't know where to put all these people." But it's nice. Then a young man came by about 20 minutes later, and he repeated that process and talked to me. And he says, "Welcome back, sir. We need people like you down here to educate our younger generation. And please, I hope you start contributing to doing that. And oh, by the way, there's no duty. Thank you very much." And oh yeah, of course. And so that was the experience.
Yeah, that sounds so promising. It sounds, it's like music to my ears, really.
This is the younger generation, and I'm sorry, even the central government officers are like that now, apparently.
Very good, very good. It's really great to know that the amount of professionalism that you're talking about. I mean, I can just gather just by hearing you.
And just the remaining part of that, I had to tell you 2 other parts of that. So I said, look, it might take 2 or 3 days of dragged out whatever nonsense there. So we went and stayed in a hotel, very nice hotel. We couldn't afford to, or I was too cheap to eat food there actually. So we found a place that was right next door. That said established 1954. That's older than me. It looked pretty run down. And I said, well, maybe we'll get takeout from there or something. And our driver who took us there said he was staying at the whatever hostel associate or tourist home attached to that. He said, "Why don't you come inside and look?" So I did that, and I said, "Okay, this place is very well laid out, very nice, very clean, spaced out, etc." So my wife and I both went there for lunch. And I just want to tell you, I ate dosha, which is I've been looking forward to eating doshas for such a long time, and a vada, whatever, and a cup of tea. My wife had a full meal. That's the Kerala tradition, full meal. That was meal time. And the driver said, "I don't want to eat too much." So he had some lemon rice or whatever. Very nice, very tasty, very well served meals. Guess how much it cost? The total was 113 rupees.
Oh my God.
That's not even $2. That's $1.50.
Well, I think that's subsidized by the people who run that, because at night their costs are significantly higher, but they keep it low because they want to give back, apparently. Not to people like me, but it was just mind blowing. And then now the hotel. So this is they're all wearing suits and all this. Young people though. Checkout time is 11 o'clock, and I said, "Look. We are going through this customs process. I don't know how long this is going to take. It might be until 1 o'clock or something. So we might ask you for a little bit of extension, something." And they said, initially they said, "Let me talk to the manager." And apparently they had, because when we came downstairs next day, they said, "Oh, by the way, don't worry about all those things. We're not too crowded today. Just take your time. Don't worry about it." And so we checked out anyway at 11 o'clock because things were going quite all right, and sat there and had a long conversation with them. I mean, no, I could not expect something like this. Even in the Indian-run hotels in the USA, of which there are so many, this is the younger generation, okay? And so
This is it's so surprising, and it's so nice to hear that people have such positive experiences to talk about. People have lived in America throughout their lives and returning to India and not knowing what to expect, and this is how they are greeted. This is it's really, I mean, anybody who's going to listen to this, I'm sure this will be it will create such a positive uh, impression on their minds. But
I hope
one
so.
thing I do wonder, that I think it's wonderful that the prices are so low and they're yet so professional. Uh, I
Oh, the
hear
hotel was
about,
not that much, but it was still a very, very good deal, mind you. I'm not going to name hotels and things like that,
yes,
but
yes, sure. I was just wondering that, when we hear about inflation in India, prices rising, so if they charge this much, how
I
do they
think
manage?
they were deliberately keeping that lunchtime price so low because to help people, and that's all it was. And they're of course too honest to charge us more. Uh,
And also, it's business. It's
yes,
business
right.
sense, which is good.
Yeah.
Why not?
Yeah, I just salute their spirits. This is such an encouraging story. We don't always have to talk about or depend on government policies or depend on just the state government or the central government to change us. But these are the people who are the future of India, or who are paving the way for the youth employment, or, for India to change. So this was such a heartening conversation. Any closing remarks by both of you? We still have another 3 to 4 minutes, but would like to know. It has been so interesting. I'm going to cherish this conversation for a long time.
I wanted to
Yeah.
say this while I'm still so fresh because as people live in a place for too long, they said, "Oh yeah, but no, yeah." The bad things stick in their minds more,
Mm,
and I hope I don't become like that. But
please
I'm
do.
afraid I probably will. So I just wanted to say these things out, and there's so much that one can learn, and I am learning, and it is really a new India.
Yeah, I agree. And Professor Narayanan, we won't let you change. We are having this recorded, so we'll play
All
this
right.
for you when you change and start looking at the potholes and finding faults where there is hardly any.
Right.
Anjali,
Definitely.
frankly, I
So I,
am.
I,
I
I-
am
I'll just add one more thing. So I was on a customer service through the internet is always very interesting. And as you know, so I was on in a conversation with somebody, and all I was trying to say was, look, I wasn't calling to complain. I just wanted to know when something was going to get installed. Got turned, bounced around, bounced around, bounced around. And so one came and said, "May I help you? How can I be of help?" And I said, "Look, I want to know if you can read the previous trail of comments, I mean, of a discussion, so I don't have to repeat everything." And there was a silence. There's a comment saying, "Can you please evaporate?"
Can you please evaporate?
I said,
must
"Excuse me."
elaborate. Yeah, yeah.
so so I,
Hilarious.
I, I decided to evaporate from there.
Yeah, Anjali, I'm actually very optimistic, and I see a lot of positives, and I feel that uh, a lot of good things are coming, and a lot of good things will come. But certain things we need to change, and I think each of us can make that difference. And frankly, I'm very hopeful about the youngsters. I'm more worried about the oldies. My generation. We have let a lot of people down, and I think that we should not let that happen again. So I think a lot of good things will happen and can happen, but all of us have to keep striving. And as I want to end with Tagore's words, he was such a wonderful person, with the poet with words.
Mhm.
He had written sometime in the early 1900s that he talked about India as the it's a land of milk and honey, and how we need to take it back to its to that condition again. And what he always said is that amar ei deshetei janam, amar ei deshetei mori. So I think that's what we need to think about.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Narayananji, Nivedita, for projecting such a positive view of the future of India's young generation. Having gone through so many tough challenges as COVID, communal tensions, etc., just name it, people around the world, and especially the Western media, finds it really hard to fathom this truth about India, an India that is all set to rise and shine. But now we have a much clearer picture and a roadmap of the upcoming India that promises prosperity, diversity, harmony, and well being to all its young citizens. So, with that, thank you so much. Cheers to a rising India. Jai Bharat, Vande Mataram.